small town of Delavan Hills, nestled in the quiet suburbs of Wisconsin, had never seen a case like this. For years, it was just rows of cornfields, barns, and friendly neighbors waving at each other over fences. Crime was a distant rumor, something you saw on TV. But all that changed on a humid July evening when 17-year-old Priya Mehta didn't come home. What started as an ordinary Sunday would soon turn into one of the most disturbing and gut-wrenching murder investigations the county had ever seen. The kind of story that makes you hold your child just a little tighter at night. And it all began with a missing moped ride. Hello, and welcome to the Lisa Crime Channel. Today, we bring you one of the darkest and most brutal stories, where the trust and love of parents turned into tragedy. This is the story of how a young girl's first step toward independence became her last. How an attempt to grow up too soon opened the door to true evil. And how evil, disguised as something ordinary, can hide on the most ordinary farm. My name is Lisa, and today you will hear the case of Priya Mehta, a case that shook all of Wisconsin. In the quiet outskirts of Delavan Hills, Wisconsin, summer had a rhythm all its own. Long golden evenings, the hum of cicadas in the trees, and the gentle sound of lawn sprinklers tick-tick-ticking against picket fences filled the air. It was the kind of place where nothing ever really happened, and everyone liked it that way. For people who lived there, peace was the norm. Priya Mehta had just turned 17, and she wasn't the kind of girl to waste a summer lying around. Smart, kind, a little shy but always driven, she carried herself with a quiet determination. She had plans, big ones, that went far beyond her small town. She dreamed of studying environmental science and even starting her own sustainability nonprofit someday. Her parents, Anil and Kavita, couldn't have been prouder of her ambition. That summer, Priya had taken a job at a nearby pig farm, Nolan Acres, about 20 minutes from their home. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and more importantly, it gave her a sense of independence. She wanted to earn her own money, cover her college application fees, and prove that she could handle responsibility on her own. For her, it was a first real taste of adulthood. For the first few weeks, Anil insisted on driving her to and from the farm. He didn't feel comfortable letting her travel alone, especially with the farm located past a bend in the old county road. It was a 2-lane stretch with no streetlights and dense woods pressing in from both sides. Nothing had ever happened there, but still, fathers worry. That protective instinct never quite leaves. Priya never complained, but she asked for her chance. She didn't nag, she didn't argue, she simply asked. Calmly and maturely, she told her father she was ready. "Dad, I think I'm ready to go alone." And finally, on July 12th, her chance came. The moped had been her birthday gift just a month earlier. A cherry red 50cc she had practiced riding up and down their long driveway every afternoon until she was confident. She had even taken a safety course, wore her helmet every time, and kept her eyes locked on the road. Priya was careful, cautious, and responsible. She was ready to prove it. That morning, she packed her lunch, pulled her black hair into a low ponytail, and came downstairs with calm confidence. Her father handed her the keys with a smile, but not without a dozen reminders. Drive slow, stay on the main road, text when you get there. She laughed and nodded, as she always did, promising to be safe. At 9:12 a.m., Priya left home for what would be her first and last solo trip to work. Anil stood at the end of the driveway a little longer than usual, watching. He followed the red taillight until it disappeared behind the trees. There was a flutter in his chest, not fear exactly, just something, a feeling he couldn't quite name. By all accounts, the day unfolded like any other. The sun rose high, the farm bustled with its usual activity, and Priya went about her work without incident. She clocked in, helped in the feed prep room, logged her hours, and even chatted briefly with the barn supervisor about switching shifts. Nothing unusual happened, no warning signs. At around 5:30 p.m., her shift ended. Before leaving, Priya sent her father a quick text, heading home in 15. Anil replied immediately, "Okay, beta, be careful, see you soon." To him, it was just another routine exchange, nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't know it would be her last message. What happened between that text and the moment Priya should have come home has haunted her family ever since. Independence is a milestone every teenager longs for, but for Priya Mehta, it came at the highest cost. By the time the sun began to dip behind the trees that lined the outskirts of Delavan Hills, Anil and Kavita Mehta were already in the living room, waiting. Dinner was on the stove, a mild lentil curry, Priya's favorite. The plan was simple. She'd walk through the door, kick off her shoes, and tell them about her day. Maybe laugh about something one of the workers said, maybe complain about the heat. But at 6:15 p.m., Priya still wasn't home, and that wasn't like her. She was punctual, the kind of girl who always kept her word. If she said 15 minutes, she meant it. Anil checked his phone again, but there was nothing. No message, no call. At 6:28 p.m., he sent her another message. "You okay? Almost home?" There was no reply. By 6:45, worry had started to settle in, creeping slowly into the room like an unwelcome guest. Kavita suggested maybe she had stopped for something, a bottle of water, a snack, or just a short rest. But Anil knew the road home, and there weren't any shops. Just miles of two-lane highway, open fields, and a narrow gravel path that split off toward the neighboring town of Briar Falls. At 7:03, he tried calling her. No answer. Just one ring, then voicemail. At first, they tried to stay calm. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she had stopped to help someone. But as the silence stretched, the maybes felt weaker and weaker. By 7:45, Anil was grabbing his keys and heading out the door. He retraced the route from their home to Nolan Acres, the same drive he had made almost every day for 3 weeks. This time, though, every shadow on the roadside felt heavier. Every empty bend in the road looked suspicious. He slowed down as he approached the stretch of highway that passed the old tree line, the point where a dirt path branched off toward the woods, and that's when he saw it. Priya's moped was parked off to the side of the road, leaning slightly in the gravel. The engine was cold. Her helmet still rested on the seat, and the keys were still in the ignition. But there was no sign of Priya anywhere. Anil's heart sank as he stepped out of the car. He called out her name and checked the bushes. He walked up and down the trail, straining to hear even the faintest sound. But there was nothing. No footprints, no voices, no explanation. The silence pressed in, and finally, Anil dialed 911. The police arrived just after 9 p.m. A missing persons report was filed. Officers took statements, snapped photos, marked tire tracks, and began canvassing the area. At first, they thought she might have taken the trail into Briar Falls. Maybe she had gotten turned around. Maybe she was lost. But Priya wasn't the type to wander off. She was careful. She didn't take detours. And then came the first clue. Just beyond the gravel pull-off, one of the officers found a backpack strap torn clean through. A few feet away, nestled in the grass, lay a silver earring. Kavita confirmed it without hesitation. It's hers. Still, the authorities hesitated to jump to conclusions. Maybe she had been grabbed, or maybe she tripped and fell into the brush. As the hours ticked by, hope began to turn into dread. By midnight, flashlights dotted the roadside like fireflies. Volunteers showed up with headlamps, search dogs were brought in, and helicopters hovered briefly overhead before returning to base. But still, nothing. No footprints, no torn clothing, no calls, no texts. Priya had simply vanished. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole, and all her parents could do was wait, helpless, numb, staring down a road that now felt like a doorway to something monstrous. In a town like Delavan Hills, no one expected this. No one thought a quiet farm road would become the center of a nightmare. That night, every parent in the county tucked their children in just a little tighter. and Anil Mehta stood in the dark, still holding the keys to the moped his daughter never rode home. By sunrise on July 13th, the case of Priya Mehta had already become the most urgent missing persons investigation Delavan Hills had ever seen. Local deputies were joined by the county sheriff's office, and soon after, volunteers from nearby towns, Briar Falls, Oak Valley, even as far as Madison, began showing up with boots, backpacks, and printed flyers. It was all hands on deck, and the community moved quickly. The trail near the moped, a narrow gravel footpath leading into a wooded corridor, became the immediate focus. It was the only direction Priya could have gone if she had left her vehicle voluntarily. At first glance, it made sense. Maybe she took the trail to cut through to Briar Falls. Maybe she agreed to meet someone or went looking for help. But the Mehtas knew better. Priya didn't take shortcuts through unfamiliar woods. She was cautious, precise, predictable. That path wasn't something she would have used, not unless she was forced to. The thought chilled everyone who knew her habits. Within hours, officers combing through the path began to find scattered items: a cracked phone case, pale pink, a plastic water bottle, unopened, and later, a shattered phone screen with no body attached and no SIM card inside. All of it was discovered within a 100-yard stretch. Everything was just left there, not buried, not hidden, just dropped, as if someone had tossed them while running or while trying to stage a story. To the untrained eye, it looked like Priya had wandered off that path and was grabbed somewhere in the brush. But to investigators, the pattern was off. The arrangement was too convenient, too scattered, too clean, and something else felt wrong. The direction. The trail curved northward toward Briar Falls, away from her home, away from the farm, away from any logical route Priya would have taken. It didn't look like she had gotten lost. It looked like someone wanted police to think she had. By midday, Sheriff Donna Albright, a 20-year veteran with a calm voice and a sharp gut, called a briefing with her team. The theory was forming. Someone had taken Priya, placed her belongings along that trail, and was now buying time. Maybe they were watching, maybe fleeing, maybe both. So the search grid expanded. Drones scanned the tree lines. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Local game wardens mapped out water sources, ravines, and sheds. Every barn, outhouse, and tool shack within a 2-mile radius was marked and checked. Volunteers fanned out into the forest in slow, sweeping rows. One of them, Martin Voss, a local electrician and close friend of the Mehta family, was assigned the outer perimeter of Nolan Acres itself, the very farm where Priya had spent her last known day alive. He figured it was a formality, but something tugged at him. A gut feeling told him to look closer. Nolan Acres was a sprawling property, split into feed silos, 2 storage barns, and at the far end, the pig enclosure. It wasn't just a pen, it was a full containment yard, muddy and enclosed, with over 100 pigs roaming across sloped ground. At the back of the enclosure, where most workers never ventured, Martin noticed something that didn't belong. A sneaker lay half-buried, mud-stained, and unmistakably pink Converse. He stared for a long moment before taking a shaky step forward. It wasn't near a gate. It wasn't near a path. It was just there, in the mud, alone. And just like that, everything changed. The sheriff was called, and the area was locked down. Officers escorted the pigs into a holding pen to clear the site. Over the next few hours, crime scene investigators began to rake the mud, turn the hay, and dig. They worked slowly, carefully, deliberately, because this was no longer just a farm. It was now a crime scene, and what they would find buried just beneath the surface would shatter everything. It was just after 3 p.m. when the crime scene tape went up around the pig enclosure at Nolan Acres. The pink sneaker had been the first sign, the clue that shifted everything. And now, investigators weren't searching for a missing girl anymore. They were searching for a body. The pig yard was massive, spanning over an acre of uneven terrain slick with mud, waste, and scattered feed. The pigs, restless and confused, had been moved into an auxiliary pen while detectives, forensic techs, and a handful of grim-faced volunteers fanned out with shovels, gloves, and portable lights. One by one, they began sifting through the muck. The smell was unbearable, thick, rotten, chemical. Still, they pressed on. 30 minutes in, a tech unearthed something partially buried beneath a layer of straw and slop. It was a clump of black fabric, torn and damp. Further digging revealed human hair, tangled and matted. The search halted immediately, and silence fell over the enclosure. The lead investigator radioed for the coroner. Slowly, inch by inch, layer by layer, they cleared the area. And then they found what was left of 17-year-old Priya Mehta. Her body had been hastily dumped in the southernmost corner of the pig pen. It was clear she had been dead for days. What wasn't clear, at least not immediately, was just how much of her remained. The pigs had done what pigs do. They had found her and they had begun to feed. The discovery sent a wave of nausea through even the most hardened officers. One detective had to step away, while another wept quietly behind her clipboard. What had started as a missing persons case was now a homicide investigation, and one of the most disturbing in memory. The medical examiner was quick to confirm the worst. Despite the condition of the body, they were able to determine evidence of sexual assault. They noted ligature marks on her neck and severe blunt force trauma to the skull. Priya had been raped, strangled, and discarded like garbage, left to be destroyed by animals. But the pigs hadn't finished the job, and that was the killer's mistake. In the coming hours, forensics began mapping the surrounding areas of the farm. Behind a feed shed, they uncovered a blood-stained tarp. Under a hay bale, they found a pair of men's gloves. And inside a nearby utility room, a space used by workers to change clothes, they discovered traces of blood on the drain. Someone had tried to clean up. It was sloppy, it was rushed, it was panicked. And that panic would become the thread investigators would pull until the whole truth unraveled. The killer had left more behind than he realized. Back at home, Priya's parents were informed of the discovery. Anil fell to his knees when the words reached him. Kavita collapsed and had to be sedated. There were no words to prepare them for what had been done to their daughter. She had left their home just 2 days earlier, full of life and dreams. Now she was gone. Someone on that farm had taken everything from them. The investigators knew where it had ended. What they had to figure out next was who had brought her there and why. After the discovery of Priya Mehta's body, Nolan Acres transformed overnight. The farm shifted from a place of daily work into a full-blown crime scene. Local news vans lined the fences, helicopters circled overhead, and reporters whispered outside the sheriff's office. Inside the investigation room, all attention turned to the people who worked on that farm. Over the past 3 weeks, Priya had mostly kept to herself. She was friendly and polite, but quiet. She showed up, did her job, and went home. There were only a few regular staff members she interacted with, and 2 of them stood out right away. Ravi Sharma, age 34, and his younger brother Deepak, 28, were both seasonal hires. Their backgrounds came back clean. No priors, no red flags. On paper, they looked like ordinary workers, but there was something about them that felt off from the start. When investigators called the brothers in for questioning, their answers seemed too perfect. Ravi claimed he had been home the entire evening of July 12th, finishing his shift around 3 p.m. and spending the night watching YouTube and texting friends. Deepak backed up his story word for word. The responses were too neatly rehearsed, too aligned, and without the slightest variation. The inconsistencies began to surface soon after. Investigators pulled security footage from a gas station 2 miles from the farm. A timestamp showed Ravi entering the store at 8:12 p.m., sweaty and out of breath, buying a Gatorade and a bottle of hand soap. This was over 2 hours after he claimed to be at home for the night. When confronted, Ravi shrugged it off, saying he had forgotten to mention it. But the video revealed something else. Scratches were visible on the inside of Ravi's right forearm. They were fresh and long, exactly the kind of marks someone might get if they were fighting off a terrified victim. The suspicion grew stronger, and investigators decided to search the brothers' trailer. Inside the washing machine, detectives found damped clothes, a work shirt and jeans. The shirt carried faint brownish stains near the collar and waist, and a presumptive test revealed blood. On the floor beneath Ravi's bed, tucked into an old shoebox, they discovered a delicate gold chain with a small heart pendant. It was Priya's, and her mother confirmed it softly. "She wore it every day. It was mine when I was her age." Ravi denied everything. He claimed he had no idea how the necklace ended up there. He suggested Priya might have dropped it at work and he had picked it up, or that someone was trying to frame him. But the denial didn't last long, because Deepak, who had stayed quiet through most of the interrogation, began to crack. His hands shook, his eyes darted, and he kept asking for water. He looked at the clock again and again. Finally, after 8 hours of questioning, Deepak spoke 6 words that changed the case forever. "It was my brother. I saw him." His confession opened a new window into the crime. According to Deepak, the evening of July 12th began like any other. They finished work early, and he stayed in the trailer watching videos while Ravi went out for a walk. When Ravi returned around 7:40 p.m., he was pale, out of breath, and his clothes were covered in dirt and streaks of red. He stripped off his clothes, threw them into the washer, and locked himself in the bathroom for nearly half an hour. When Ravi finally emerged, he looked calm and cold. That was when he muttered chilling words. "She tried to scream." Deepak admitted he didn't know exactly what happened, but he said Ravi had been watching Priya for weeks. He made unsettling comments about how she was too good for this place and needed to be taught humility. Deepak claimed he was terrified and that Ravi forced him to help move the body. They waited until nightfall, carried Priya to the pig pen, and covered her with hay. Later, they scattered her belongings along the Briar Falls Trail to make it seem as if she had wandered off. "I didn't kill her, but I didn't stop it either." The brothers were arrested within 24 hours, and DNA samples were collected. The results left no room for doubt. Ravi's DNA was found under Priya's fingernails, on her shirt, and on the rope recovered from the pig pen drain room. A strand of Priya's hair was discovered on his pillow. One final, horrifying detail sealed the case. Forensic analysis found pig feces on Ravi's shoes, the same area of the enclosure where Priya's body had been recovered. With mounting evidence, charges were filed. Ravi was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated sexual assault, and desecration of a corpse. Deepak was charged with accessory to murder and obstruction of justice. For a small Wisconsin town that rarely made headlines, the revelation was devastating. 2 brothers had crossed an unthinkable line, and Priya Mehta's family, once proud of their daughter's independence, was now left to bury her beneath a sky that would never feel safe again. By the time the trial began in late January 2023, the town of Delavan Hills no longer felt like the place it once was. The quiet roads, the trusting smiles, and the sense that things like this didn't happen here, all of it was gone. In its place remained a deep wound, one that wouldn't heal for years, maybe ever. The courthouse was packed on the first day. Not with reporters or photographers, Delavan wasn't that kind of town, but with neighbors, friends, teachers who had watched Priya grow up, and former classmates. Even strangers came just to bear witness, because they all wanted the same thing: justice. The prosecution laid it out with chilling clarity. Ravi Sharma had been watching Priya quietly and obsessively for weeks. They showed his browser history and his disturbing search terms. They produced his messages to Deepak, some deleted, some recovered, where he described Priya in ways far from innocent. The obsession had been building long before the crime. Then came the timeline. Priya left the farm around 5:45 p.m. Witnesses placed Ravi near the pig pen around 6:10 p.m. His DNA, found on the rope, under Priya's nails, and on her clothing, was undeniable. Surveillance showed him at the gas station after 8, nervous, sweating, and scratched. But the most horrifying detail silenced the courtroom. The forensics team confirmed that Priya was still alive when she was placed near the pig pen, and likely died only minutes before the pigs reached her. A few jurors turned away at the revelation. One person left the room altogether. The horror of those final minutes was impossible to ignore. Ravi's defense tried to argue fabrication, setup, and eventually mental illness. They claimed he had a history of trauma, that he was emotionally unstable. They suggested Deepak had lied to shift blame onto his brother, but none of it worked. The evidence spoke louder than any excuse. And Deepak, he testified. Through tears, he told the court everything: how Ravi had always controlled him, how he was afraid, how he saw his brother come back that night with blood on his hands and no remorse in his eyes. He didn't try to excuse himself, and he didn't ask for pity. He said one thing over and over: I should have stopped him. His testimony was raw, emotional, and devastating. It sealed the picture of what had truly happened that night. When the verdict came, the town held its breath. Ravi Sharma was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Deepak Sharma was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and sentenced to 25 years, with eligibility for parole after 18. Neither of them looked back as they were let out of the courtroom. For Priya's parents, there were no words for what came next. They had sat in the front row every single day of the trial. They listened, they cried, they held hands. And when it was over, Kavita collapsed in the hallway, clutching the locket that once belonged to Priya. There was no celebration and no closure, just silence. Because justice, when it comes, isn't always enough. The loss of Priya was something no verdict could repair. The weight of it remained with everyone who loved her. The people of Delavan Hills still talk about Priya. They built a small memorial at the edge of the pig pen, where wildflowers now grow over what used to be mud. Her high school planted a tree in her honor, and her biology teacher led the dedication. A plaque beneath the leaves reads, "She wanted to change the world. We'll never forget how much she already did." Priya Mehta died trying to take one small step toward adulthood, and in that step, she met the worst of what humanity can be. But the town that failed to protect her now tells her story over and over again, not out of fear, but out of duty, to remember, to stay vigilant, and to protect the next girl who wants to ride home on her own. Because some lessons are learned far too late, and some names should never be forgotten. This case shook me, not just because of the horror, but because of how quickly evil can appear in familiar places. Priya Mehta didn't do anything wrong. She was simply trying to grow up. And yet, in the span of a single evening, her life was taken. Her future was stolen. If you've made it this far, please take a moment to reflect, share this video, and keep her memory alive. Let's remember Priya. And if you want more true stories like this, told with empathy, facts, and care, subscribe to this channel. It's free, but it means everything. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, And as always, justice may come late, but it comes. Lisa Crime.